And here we go.
There we are.
Okay, Suzanne, we're off.
Welcome everybody to this new webinar series, Ayres Sensory Integration Intervention Treatment Tuesdays. So we're very excited. We're CLASI, the Collaborative for Leadership in Ayres Sensory Integration, is partnered with Southpaw Enterprises, and I just want to acknowledge Mark Hamilton for all the work that he's done behind the scenes to allow us to be able to offer these monthly webinars focused on ASI intervention. So Dr. Zoe Mailloux and myself, Dr. Susanne Smith Roley, are so honored that we're going to get to moderate these sessions. And they're planned to illustrate current evidence-based practice and data-driven professional practice in a variety of settings and with a variety of populations. We are going to record these sessions, and they will be made available on the CLASI and the Southpaw website. All right. So I don't know, Zoe, if you have...
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick before we introduce our speakers. Mark, I think if you could just show your face for a moment. We just really do want to acknowledge, there he is, Mark Hamilton. I think you have to say hello so that your face comes on the screen. Okay.
Glad to be here.
And we're so glad to have you, and we just so appreciate the support that we've benefited from over all these years from Southpaw with the wonderful equipment. And it's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to really focus on intervention. I think that as therapists, we always gravitate towards what do we do to help? What are we going to do in treatment? And those of you who've been in our programs know that we really ask you to work through all the steps and not to jump right into treatment. But in these sessions, we're going to be able to jump to treatment. So thank you for the opportunity and for the sponsorship, and just happy to be here and get a chance to think about these precious children and how we're going to have an ability to help them.
You know, we at Southpaw appreciate everything all the therapists do, you know, to help make other people's lives better. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we decided we would start it off with our own family. Dr. Annie Baltazar-Mori and Dr. Ayres Roley, and of course we've known them for a very long time and worked with them. Annie is the owner of PlaySense in Redondo Beach. She received her doctoral degree in occupational therapy at USC, and she's one of the instructors for the CLASI program. And she's got a remarkable mentoring program. It's a formalized mentor program, and there's very good feedback on this program that she offers through PlaySense. And her website is there for people who would like to hear more about that. Asia, well, okay. She got her doctorate at Thomas Jefferson University. She's the owner of Centerpoint for Children. And I'm very proud. That's it.
You should have let me introduce Asia, right?
No,
I was just about to say that.
What were we thinking, letting you introduce Asia? Although I'm pretty proud of her too. But.
Okay, we are going to have a raffle. That's in a different part of my brain. So stay tuned. So those of you who are staying, throughout the webinar, we are going to hold a raffle. Southpaw has generously donated prizes that will be awarded at the end of each of the seminars that are going to be held, and go back to these dates. So take down those dates, those Tuesdays. We will announce the times because some of our guests are international. So the time of the day may change, but those dates will be steady, okay? So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Annie.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, so I think I can share now. Is that right, Marco? think you're
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Amy.
Okay. So, today, the purpose of today is to really talk through sensory integration treatment in a private practice setting. And so both Asia and I are really excited to share our two settings and two very different clients. So we're going to be walking you through some brief case studies so you kind of know the child's background and their testing scores, because again, we don't guess, we assess, and we want to know like what, right, Zoe? And so we like to know what we're doing in a treatment session. So we refer back to our assessment data. So I'm going to start with my case study of a little girl. We're calling her E. She's 5 years, 2 months old at the time of her evaluation, and Zoe evaluated this little girl in our clinic. So Zoe, please jump in if you want to give some more information about discussions with the family and kind of your understanding of her case. She is in pre-K and pre-kindergarten, and she's achieved many of her developmental milestones within the typical range. She walked and developed language, pretty a little bit later than typical. And her diagnosis, she had a diagnosis of hypotonia. I don't believe she has another diagnosis. And that diagnosis was given to her by a developmental pediatrician and a physical therapist. Let me click through. So of course, like with any evaluation, we start with the participation strengths and interests. And then we want to also know what the challenges are, why they're coming to occupational therapy. This little one, she is a smart little girl and so hardworking. She likes to be a problem solver. And she's pretty adventurous. One of my favorite things that Zoe put in the report is that she loves tutus. And she actually does love tutus because she wears them a lot. And they're really cute little tutus. But then some of her challenges, I think one of the main things that parents came to us first initially was she was having some big emotional regulation issues, very frustrated. It was becoming a concern because she wasn't able to complete tasks, everyday tasks, like putting on socks and coloring her paper without ripping the paper. She was struggling with getting dressed, and then she would trip and fall a lot when she was walking down the sidewalk. I think that was like one of the main descriptions the mom gave was she wasn't catching herself when she'd fall, and she struggled to just walk down the sidewalk safely. And if you're walking down a busy street, that can be kind of concerning. So we also gathered some performance challenge information and strengths with the Family Life Impact Questionnaire. And here's just a sample of one of the areas around the daily household routines that she was struggling in. So this S column, and sometimes there was, some more challenges in that area for her. And then Zoe gave her the sensory integration and Praxis test, and these are her scores. And knowing, if you're familiar with the SIT, anything below that -1 is considered more of a problematic area, below the average range. So you can see she has several areas that were very challenging for her. But her strengths here are shown in some of her visual perceptual skills, and then with visual praxis skills. And then we also have our sensory processing measure with some areas that it looks like there could be some reactivity, but what we think is looking at her scores and observing her in the clinic that perhaps her challenges are more related to some more challenges in sensory discrimination rather than reactivity. And we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Annie,
yes.
Annie, there was a comment that someone couldn't see the PowerPoint. Is that across the board, or is that only for Mia? Okay, others are saying they can see it. So maybe Mia is just having a little connection issue. Okay, just wanted to check. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for checking in. All right, so after we've gathered all of our assessment data, we really use the data-driven decision-making process within our clinic. And I know Asia will show you the same process that she uses in her clinic. But we really first start looking at how our assessment data relates to those reported strengths and challenges that the child is experiencing and the parents are reporting at home. So we want to see if there's any correlation between the two. And then from there, we develop our hypotheses, which are really guiding our treatment and telling us what we're working on based on our assessment data. These hypotheses also drive our outcome measures in terms of our writing goals and then understanding what we're measuring in terms of some of those more sensory motor areas that we're working on in the clinic. So if we're looking at little E's strengths, I've already talked about some of her strengths, and then looking at her testing, which I mentioned, that space visualization test, figure ground perception, and the constructional praxis test, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the SIPT is more of a block design test. We see that she really does understand the directions given to her and that she followed through well with her tasks. And then she's really, really cooperative and very hardworking and very driven to accomplish. So looking at those strengths, these strengths, when we're forming our hypotheses, they're really going to help us understand how we're going to encourage and draw E into some more challenging activities within the clinic, in the clinic setting, to really work on some of those areas that aren't as strong for her. So we know that the cognitive, visual, and language abilities, that she uses those to really compensate for other areas. And she looks like a very, what's the word, like functional child. Like she really can really kind of orchestrate her world around her to meet her needs. But then we hear she's frustrated and she is struggling emotionally, and we really want to understand what that's about. Looking at her scores, it's really clear that she's really working extremely hard using cognitive, visual, and language abilities to overcome these foundational sensory motor abilities that we would expect a child her age to have. So again, like those visual skills really contribute to her interest with puzzles and games. And then she loves to dance and likes music. So perhaps incorporating that into her treatment sessions will help her with some of those motor planning challenges that we'll be putting in front of her. So this is a lot to look at, and I'm sorry, I meant to break it down. But now we look at her challenges and how these scores really contribute to her overall kind of picture of what's going on with her and how we're going to be supporting her in occupational therapy. What will we be working on to improve those occupations? So one of the first challenges is just safety in the community with walking down that sidewalk safely. And we see that she really does have poor vestibular registration. We see that post-order nystagmus score is low. Her standing walking balance is low. And then when we look at the sensory processing measure, we see that the balance scale is not that strong for her either. We also see there's some challenges with proprioceptive functions based on some of the assessment data we collected, which is right here in this middle column. This is our assessment data. Challenges with bilateral coordination, and then also some postural ocular challenges related to her ability to stabilize her core and control her eyes for ocular motor skills. So over on the right, you'll see our hypothesis about inefficient processing of vestibular information, and how it's really challenging her balance and her ability to use those equilibrium and the writing reactions to maintain an upright position when she's walking down the street. Her proprioceptive sense is also not really helping her to avoid obstacles, to keep from tripping and falling. And then the poor bilateral integration and postural ocular challenges contribute also to challenges in that area. So looking at those hypotheses, those are areas that we're going to work on to improve her ability to safely walk down the street. You see other challenges here around getting dressed. with low tactile perception scores, poor Praxis scores, and some visual motor control and planning. And those are relating to like using those tactile sense for body awareness. It makes it difficult for her to plan her actions, especially when she's trying to get dressed and her vision is occluded when her shirt is over her eyes. That can be really challenging. Doing some pre-academic writing is also a little bit more challenging for her, with coloring, and then also just using some of those more automatic functions of the sensory systems to help her adjust and adapt quickly to those everyday situations at school and at home when she's getting dressed. So you can see she's working really hard to do everyday basic things that she practices every day. So the efforts that she's putting forth is really wearing on her and, taxing her.
Annie, if I
Yes.
could maybe just jump in for 1 second, I just want to acknowledge that Dr. Roseanne Schaaf really, spearheaded these steps of data-driven decision-making, and this step of forming the hypothesis. I just like to acknowledge that it sounds so simple, but it's been such a powerful tool of taking the time to make that link between what we found on the tests and what the parents told us. And these participation challenges are really almost verbatim from the family. And this is directly out of a report. We put these charts right into our report. So if you haven't been doing this in your practice, I really strongly recommend that you try it. Very consistently, the parents tell me that this part of the report is what helps them the most in really understanding what's going on. For this child, these parents are highly educated professional parents, and they knew that she had trouble with balance. They knew that she was clumsy, but they really did not, hadn't thought about the vestibular sense in particular, proprioception, the tactile sense. And this chart really helped them to understand how stressful life is for this little girl. They knew that, she was struggling, but they hadn't thought about how much attention and thinking she had to put into some automatic things. So I just wanted to throw that in. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. So, let's get to treatment. So this little one, this is one of the goals based on her performance challenges. And then I've put in some ideas of how I would bring this to life in a treatment session. How am I going to address these underlying functions that are impacting her occupations? Because that is my value as an occupational therapist. We have this advanced training in sensory integration. We're able to really dissect occupations and understand it from these very foundational needs that these children have. And that's what we're doing in our treatment session. I am not practicing walking down the street with this little girl. I am improving her vestibular and proprioceptive functions, her tactile functions, so that she can balance and walk down the street safely. So these are some of the areas that I'm going to kind of incorporate into the treatment sessions. I start in the first box talking about her strengths and how I'm going to use her strengths to really pull her in, that imaginary play and storytelling to kind of help her with her strong auditory skills and help her to kind of rope her into the excitement of the treatment session. And then using those visual targets to help her encourage her organization of her body and her movements. And then using different types of surfaces to encourage more proprioceptive and vestibular discrimination for balance. So I'm just going to, I can just show you one more slide like that, but I'm going to pull up my video and show you the video now, and then just really talk about these things as we're watching the video. I'm not going to share the sound because there's a lot of joyful sounds in the background and it's hard to hear. Okay, so the Southpaw equipment really does provide us with what we need to address these what we call as proximal areas of need, but really addressing that proprioceptive, tactile, and vestibular input that's so important for some of these skills that little E needs. So this is the Rainbow Lycra platform swing. And it gives this little one, lots of proprioceptive input. So you see she's pushing down on her knees so she can stabilize herself. But then when we start giving her a little bit of movement, she kind of has to sit back. But this proprioception that this swing and the added tactile that this swing gives really helps a lot of kids who have more challenges, who require more support from those sensory areas. And then of course, we're incorporating more tactile play. She loves to write and draw. So we're putting out, she's asking for numbers, and we're using that to kind of encourage her to stick with the activity a little longer. And you see the therapist is watching her and adjusting the speed. So this is a little one. Let's remember, she has a hard time with balance. And I want you to see how she gets out of the swing. She's only been in therapy, probably this is her third, maybe fourth session at this point. So all that tactile and proprioception, she kind of wants this therapist to help her, but the therapist is encouraging her to do it by herself. She did a beautiful job. So we saw that big adaptive response with her balance. So in this session, we're really working on some of those vestibular and postural challenges. We've got the southpaw barrel over there that we're using as a target. And the swing she's on is a lot like the southpaw frog swing. And she's just using some ocular skills to pick up those animals on the floor. And then we want her to deliver them to the barrel. And it's a little bit of a challenge, but she loves that activity. And then we've got the southpaw flexion disc, and we put the VSDs or the bungees on it to help her get a little bit more of that proprioceptive input while she's bouncing. You see in this one, she really likes to bounce. And the extra tactile and the stability she gets from that firm surface kind of helps take the effort off of her body a little bit. And back to the frog swing, because she loves this swing. I think it gives her a lot of that vestibular that she really needs with the bungee cords. And you see that nice response that she's delivering that animal to the barrel. That gives us that target that she needs.
I think we see a lot of kiddos that, their go-to, especially when they're first starting therapy, is prone on their stomach and rotary, if that's what they need, right? If they have a profile of needing a lot more vestibular input, this is probably the most intense form of vestibular input you can have, right? With your head in that horizontal plane. And then I think it's, also if you look at the practice demand of doing that, or the postural control piece, you've kind of eliminated that piece that might be hard for a lot of our kids. So I often see that kids really, giving them this opportunity to do more activities on their stomach on the swing is a nice way, especially at the beginning of their therapy sessions, to eliminate some of the potential challenges that they're having.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to point out about this little girl in particular, and those low Praxis scores that she has, she tends to do the same activity over and over again because it takes her that long to reach mastery. And so this frog swing, I know Zoe saw it in her evaluation with her, and she continues to ask for this frog swing. I think she's on her 5th or 6th session at this point. And so we're now kind of talking about how we transition her away from this swing and move her into something a little bit more challenging. And we introduced the flexion disc to her in the video. And, she was okay with it, but she really wanted to go back to her frog swing that she just loves and is comfortable with. But you can see that, that assessment data really helped us to guide these treatment sessions to get to those underlying challenges that were affecting her occupational performance. And by using a lot of the Southpaw equipment to help us get you there, like their equipment really gives us everything that we need for, or a lot of what we need anyway, for our treatment sessions to really get to these underlying areas, that vestibular, tactile, and proprioception.
And, you know, one of the questions that families often have is, can we do this at home? And, you know, couldn't she get better by just going to the park? And I think one of the unique features of the clinic environment, especially such nicely apported clinics as yours, and I think Asia will share Centerpoint, is that you can choose the exact tool that you want with all of the padding. I mean, you can customize those activities so that when she does go to the playground, she's more successful. And so in a way, I think that clinic environment provides you a space where you have control over the level of challenges for the child in those sensory, motor, and practic areas that you can't really have if you don't have control of the environment, such as a public playground.
Yeah, and I would add the novelty that we can create every time they walk in. The room never looks the same, as hard as we try to make it the same, whereas a playground always looks the same. So we can really challenge a lot of the practic challenges that a child might have.
And you know, the power of some of these, they're simple but elegant pieces of equipment. Dr. has often developed equipment with specific children in mind. And watching her on that frog swing when she first came, I could just see the power of her having her sensory needs supported in a way that she could be successful. That very simple adaptive response. I mean, she said to me and her dad, "I am a powerful and hardworking girl," when she was on that frog swing. And I think it was so meaningful to her to have that success experience. Sometimes we have to be almost brave as therapists to let children have that time and space to master her body in something simple like that. You know, we feel the pressure. We have to, you know, show that we know what we're doing and we have to do something more. But she really needed that. And her father was almost in tears seeing that success and how happy she was with her body. He said, "I never see her able to do something successfully like this." And so keep it up. Keep up the
I
good work.
appreciated, I don't know this child, but I appreciated seeing her SIP scores because they're so predictive. And you see, well, that little girl, she's going to do well on visual and construction tasks. But when you challenge her body and give her novelty, and then for me, it gives me such an appreciation for the level of difficulty in Praxis that you won't see unless you have that assessment data.
Yeah, or understand how it plays out in their daily life, because you know she was frustrated, and that might often go to a psychotherapist. But I'm not sure what led them to occupational therapy, but fortunately it did, because I think that's what she needs right now.
Thanks.
Yeah. So if there's no questions from, I don't know if any questions came up, but if not, Asia, you can move on.
Maybe I launch, and then if there's questions, people can write it in the chat and we can visit those at the end. I'll make sure that we leave enough time. Okay, now I have to share.
Yeah.
The rainbow swing was in the first scene that I showed. It's a platform swing, but instead of a hardwood surface, it has a lycra panel on it. So the child gets into it and they sink in a little bit more like they would in a lycra swing, but then it's open on top. So they have kind of that visual regard of the room. You have the benefits of a little bit of the benefits of the movement of a platform swing, but then you also get that tactile proprioceptive input from the lycra.
Okay, let's see.
You ready, Asia? I didn't see any other questions. Did you see any questions, Marco?
No questions yet.
Okay.
But like Asia said, people can write them down and we'll keep track of the questions and maybe at the end we can share that.
Okay. Okay, well, so my little girl, which is so funny, Annie and I really didn't coordinate too much, but we managed to both find two cute girls that are very different in profiles, but some of the same presenting challenges. But I just included some of the, her diagnosis is ADHD. She's 7 years old. And a little bit of her background history is that she has a twin sister, but she did have a 2-week stay in the NICU. She wears glasses due to a lazy eye on the left side. She's enrolled in a general education setting, but is getting extra support because they were finding that she was having a lot of struggles in the classroom attending, and also a lot of anxiety and huge emotional outbursts with other children and with the teacher. So some of her participation strengths and interests include that she's very artistic. She's a very persistent little girl, and also very smart, and has an excellent memory. She is very into science and the solar system, and will correct me anytime we've done any planet activity. If it's the wrong order, or if the picture doesn't look actually like the actual planet, she calls me out on it. So she's got a very good memory, and she also loves cats. And actually the family had recently gotten some kittens, and that kitten that she had gotten had been a really, really big support for her. And the family had kind of said that, you know, her love of cats had just grown tremendously, and this cat had been such a good support animal for her. Some of her challenges is that she has a lot, pretty significant difficulty playing, sharing, and collaborating with peers. Anger and aggression towards her family and her sister and peers, and also a lot of difficulty organizing daily tasks, schoolwork, and self-care in a timely manner, and needed a lot of adult prompts to get, you know, herself together in the morning. Handwriting and note-taking she was pretty resistant to doing that at school, and I think, and she often became overwhelmed and stressed in loud and busy and unpredictable environments. She likes things to be very structured, and she really liked to be in control of her environment. And when she didn't have control, and, you know, I think like on the playground at school or in the classroom, that's when we would see that anxiety kind of spike, and then, you know, sometimes result in those outbursts. Oh, there it goes. So here's her SIFT. So as you can see, I listed her lower scores on this, on the right side. So she's got a little visual, not really, but approaching, you know, below average in her visual spatial and visual figure ground scores. And then she has, you know, her tactile system is discriminating information, but then you see this really high localization of tactile stimuli. She was so dead on with her ability to discriminate where I was touching her, and actually did show a fairly hyperreactive response to the light touch stimulus. So that's giving me a little bit of my clinical reasoning is kind of moving that, you know, there's a possible acute sensitivity to light touch and pinpoint light touch, and maybe, you know, something in the reactivity profiles, maybe an overreactivity to tactile and touch input. She's having trouble processing language demands, and then also, you know, construction and spatial, and then, well, actually, I summarize all of these, and then we see that she has some balance and vestibular concerns, which I'm going to kind of do an overview of. I have an overview slide next, but I wanted to show you the graph. And then I was able to get both the teacher and the parent report on the sensory processing measure. And the teacher is reporting definite difficulties in planning and ideas, social participation, and touch, and then some problems with overall sensory responsiveness. And then the scores that were falling in the some problems range included body awareness and balance and motion. Her parent is reporting definite dysfunction in planning and ideas, some problems with social participation, and overall sensory responsiveness. So pretty consistent. So from my assessment data, I've kind of just summarized the areas of need. I thought this was a little bit easier for some people who aren't as familiar with the SIPT. But so I've identified 4 areas that I think are areas of concern for our friend. And the first was in visual motor and visual spatial deficits. And you can see the corresponding low scores here. Also, vestibular bilateral integration and sequencing deficits with low scores in standing and walking balance, motor accuracy, the posterior nystagmus, bilateral motor coordination, and sequencing praxis. Also, poor receptive language processing and response time to verbal directions on the Praxis on verbal command test. And actually that test has a subscore that you can look at the time it took them. And she, even the ones that she could do, it was taking her additional time to kind of process the request and respond accordingly. And then I'm seeing her have pretty significant sensory reactivity and modulation deficits. And her corresponding scores are coming from the SPM, but also that high LTS on the SIPT. And then also she had an irregular response to the PRN, the posterior nystagmus test. So overview, some of her participation strengths and interests include that she loves science and is interested in the solar system. And this is the assessment results come from the parent and child's report and my clinical observations. And then my hypothesis about this area of interest of hers is that she'll enjoy games that involve space, rocket ships, and the solar system, and may support her engagement in sequencing and also engaging in vestibular activities or messy tactile media if they're science-themed craft projects. Also, her scores indicate that she does have this strength in tactile perception and discrimination, and as well as proprioception. And those were her average scores on kinesthesia, finger identification, and graphesthesia. So my hypothesis in regard to that strength is that she'll enjoy resistive muscle work and heavy work activities, such as hanging on the trapeze, pushing and pulling, climbing, and crashing. And those may be motivating and enjoyable for her. And also, in my experience, they're very organizing for her. And so before I try to do any of those wet, messy tactile play, I'm probably going to spend some time just giving her body a lot of proprioceptive challenges and activities that are going to be organizing and regulating for her. In terms of, I listed 2 of her main participation challenges just for time. And the first was difficulty attending the tabletop tasks at school, taking notes, and completing writing assignments. And my assessment results show that she has poor performance on measures of vestibular function and poor visual perception and visual spatial skills. And she has poor self-regulation and disorganization related to poor sensory reactivity. And I think these assessment results lead me to my hypotheses. So in terms of her poor performance on the vestibular measures, I'm interpreting that as inefficient vestibular processing makes it difficult for her to sit for long periods of time and keep her body upright in midline. Also coordinating her gaze to keep her eyes focused and to feel alert and organized. And then I see her poor visual perception and visual spatial skills as maybe why she's having trouble with note taking and near and far point copying and some of those, resistance we're having to handwriting activities. And then I think that probably her poor self-regulation and disorganization due to this, heightened sensory reactivity we're seeing and her fluctuating response to sensory reactivity. So, because you'll see that, she does actually engage in tactile media with me in the video. I mean, it had been a while since, I think it was 6 or maybe even 8 months into our treatment of me seeing her. So she has come a long way from what her scores show in the video you'll see. But what my interpretation is that her fluctuating sensory reactivity to multiple areas of visual, auditory, movement, and touch information impacts her attention and activity level. And so she's pretty sensitive to sounds and is easily distracted by background noises. That was from the sensory processing measure. And then she's sensitive to incidental light touch and making it hard for her to attend in a busy classroom environment. The other area is that she struggles with social skills, sharing, and playing collaboratively and cooperatively with peers without upset or aggression. And the assessment results that I see that are may be related to this difficulty is her low scores on tests of praxis and bilateral integration, including oral praxis, postural praxis, sequencing praxis, and bilateral motor coordination. And so my hypothesis with this one is you can kind of just go across. I tried to keep my hypothesis and the assessment results kind of connected, but that poor praxis and sequencing makes it difficult to participate in group games or collaboratively with peers, especially when the game is moving quickly, right? And the peers are moving quick and she's having to navigate what they're doing and respond accordingly with her body. I also think that her poor performance on the measures of vestibular function are also impacting her ability to participate socially. And my hypothesis is that poor ocular motor control, balance, and posture contributes to her difficulty engaging in team activities or organized sports, which was a specific area of concern for the family. And then her signs of tactile defensiveness during the LTS and the SPM data, which showed irregular reactivity to tactile, auditory, visual, and movement input, is again causing this fluctuation in her response to sensation from her environment, which really does impact her anxiety level. And I think her ability to attend to a group, keep her body with the group, and then control her emotional responses to stimulus in her environment. I also added here at the end that, she isn't processing language. Receptive language, is a little bit tricky for her too. So that's going to make it very hard to respond to verbal directions, carry on a conversation with peers. So I like to include this, and I always, kind of want to summarize that, I see we have these areas, participation challenge areas, and based on my assessment data, I can relate that those, I think definitely an Ayres sensory integration approach to her intervention is warranted due to my assessment data, right? So her difficulties with emotional regulation and attention, as well as adaptive skill acquisition, are impacting her social and academic participation, and they really may be related to these sensory motor limitations that I found in my assessment data. And so occupational therapy services utilizing an ASI approach will assist in addressing her participation challenges. And then my service recommendation is here. I usually include, if I can, like 30 minutes per month, or, depending on how much support the family needs, maybe extra time, 15 minutes a week or something of parent education and time to establish a home program. And then, my period of intervention, which I was recommending services for 1 year with a reassessment at that time. And then I would assess her progress towards goals at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. So some of her distal participation areas and outcomes that I would like to see A do, and I think same with her parents, was to improve her cooperative participation with peers, including imitation, turn taking, and maintaining appropriate body awareness. Also demonstrating decreased tantrums and meltdowns, and improved her ability to sit and attend to tabletop tasks. I did include 2 of the outcome measures that I would use to measure these long-term. And then in terms of direct ASI intervention, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and show you guys the video. It's fairly short, and then we can talk more about some of the details. But let me get out of this. Share. Let me see if I can do this, and then it'll share the video. The video will come up. Oh, I might need to stop share and then reshare. Sorry, guys. Oh, did I emote? I didn't do the sound.
Asia, there's a couple questions, Asia. Can I ask them to you?
Yeah, sure.
There's one about, did the child get her vision tested, like convergence and divergence? Yes, so she did. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties. My computer is wanting to. We can see it.
Yes, you're sharing now, Aja.
Sorry. Okay, I am. Yeah, it's just saying my speaker wasn't working. Sorry. Yeah, so I had referred her to a developmental optometrist at the time of the evaluation. And I did do visual, I do just some clinical observations. And I'm so glad we'll have the easy to kind of give us some more standardized scores on some of these areas of visual perception and ocular motor skills. But yeah, I thought, she had glasses and she was being seen for that, but I did think that a developmental optometry evaluation, which hadn't been specifically part of her profile, was warranted based on my findings. Or just, yeah, what's that? Okay, and so this video, hopefully let me know if you can hear the sound. It was saying that the sound wasn't going to.
Could fly over and land directly inside the tiger's den. Let's see. Okay, here she goes. Good luck. Hold on. Oh, that's a tricky one.
One more?
One more.
Okay,
Oh,
this isn't coming out so good.
that's okay.
So I really love
Actually,
that you saw
you
Annie
need
using
one
her
more.
southpaw
What
barrel.
if we
I
make-
What
love
about
this
you pull me
southpaw
back?
barrel.
Pull you back even farther? Well, could we move
Well,
this ramp
it's more
back?
three
You wanna move the
tires,
ramp
three
back
tires
farther?
stacked together.
Or do you
And I
think
think
this
we
could
use
go
it, I use it probably every day in all my
Okay,
sessions.
can you push the ramp back?
A big
and I'll
wheel
make
that they
the
roll in,
trapeze
or it can
little
be a
taller?
volcano.
What do you think?
And
Okay. Here
what
she
I
goes.
found for our friend A is that it was very organizing for her to drop in and have small, dark, confined spaces for her to be in. And that's usually how we started our session, was trying to find a way that she could get a lot of proprioception and then have these kind of dark, calming spaces that sometimes she needed to stay in for a few minutes before we really got going.
Nice. Direct hit. It's a, I know, you kind of did a side set.
So
Let's
I
see
love
what's under
working on visual motor and sequencing and timing in a way with the zip line, or, where she can crash and land on pillows and she's timing her movements, but also we're giving her a lot of, proprioception with moving the pillows.
So number 4.
And then we had a planet, we were finding different planets and we were writing them on a code right here.
Do you know how to spell Jupiter?
Yep.
You do. This might be a little clue on how
So
to
I
spell it.
typically like to work on handwriting out in the clinic and within our games. I don't always, sometimes I sit at a table and do handwriting or craft activities, but I think a lot of times, especially if it's an area of concern for the child, I'm oftentimes doing the handwriting tasks or doing fine motor kind of within the context of a gross motor larger game in the clinic. So I love these southpaw tires. We use them all the time. Again, the more tires you can have, the better, because again, they can be a lot of different, they can be used in a lot of different ways, and the child can ride or use them in a lot of different planes of movement. So those are some of my favorite southpaw pieces of equipment. So this was about, I would say, I think again, at 6 to 8 months after we had started therapy. So her acceptance of different textured tactile media had grown tremendously, which was actually added to my hypothesis that it was she's actually has difficulty modulating tactile input. So she sometimes seemed hypersensitive, but then other times seemed to be really okay with the tactile media. So it wasn't necessarily consistent. And I mean, how anxiety provoking would that be if the same, tactile sense wasn't consistent day to day? So she couldn't predict how that was going to feel to her. One day it was going to be very aversive, and the next day, okay, it's fine. And, and what I talked a lot to mom about is, what environments, what were the other kind of challenges that were going on in her day that maybe would make her more reactive to incidental touch? How much challenge was put on her? How many handwriting activities did she have to do? Was PE, did PE happen that day? And then all of a sudden she's, needing that was a stressful time of her day. And then suddenly, you know, the smallest bit of incidental touch was alerting and she was very over responsive. But at other times in like a setting like this, where we're one-on-one and she's had all this time for so much proprioceptive work and crashing before, her system and her body was more ready to engage in this sort of tactile play.
Aisha, I don't know if you can see the questions in the Q&A. There's a couple specific questions about her. Can you see those?
I might stop share my screen. That might be better. There you go. Yeah. I see something about the rainbow platform swing.
No, I'm sorry. It's in the Q&A for the panelists down at the bottom, or we can read it to you if that's easier.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So yeah, so they're asking about autism. It actually was in the process. She was definitely ended up getting a psychoeducational evaluation, and there was a talk of the mom, you know, looking at maybe that maybe there was some autistic characteristics, and that maybe that was another diagnosis that would be aligned with her profile. So yeah, that was the way the family, after, you know, we had kind of started services, we kind of started talking about that more. I think you just got to approach it really slowly, because I think sometimes families aren't quite ready to hear that. So you want to give them that time to kind of go through their own stages of acceptance and grief to kind of get to the place where, you know, you can have that conversation where maybe there's, you know, another evaluation and another diagnosis that could be added. So how about Sand? She is, or markers. Sorry, it seems like, don't know what happened to that. There was a comment about sand, but now I don't see it. Oh, someone answered it? Is that what it is? I don't know. But okay, well, Sarah Fields has a really lovely comment. So the goals for both girls were very functional, but would require the parent to keep data. How do you organize this for the parent? A chart, checklists. This becomes an issue when progress has to be shown with some numerical value. Is 50% better? How do you get your baselines? And that's a great question, Sarah. And I actually did show, I stopped my PowerPoint a little early, but I did in my goals that I write, I often, I talk about, I make it measurable. So maybe I can do that really quick. I'm gonna show you guys.
While you're looking for
Yeah.
that, Aisha, I just want to add to Sarah's question there that, you know, I think sometimes, I mean, it's such a great question, Sarah, and I think that as OTs, sometimes we get kind of in the habit of doing things very automatically, like checklist and tracking. Another child that I was evaluating at PlaySense, we talked about this child needing like a chart to monitor how things were going. And Annie and I both were just a little bit taken aback that the parent looked at us and she said, I'm an engineer, I could do fancy spreadsheets, but I have no idea what you're talking about, how I would make a chart like that. And, you know, so I think it's just a good point that we may need, some of these things become second nature to us, and we may sometimes need to support parents with some simple charts. With technology, we can set up some simple kind of survey type forms that would be a little bit easier for parents just to fill in what happens if they fill them in once a week, and that will automatically generate bar charts and pie charts and things like that. So just to think about not adding to the stress of families, but keeping things simple and organized for the parent.
Yeah, so I do like a check-in. So I usually will write in my goal. You can see here that I, you know, the end. And so I'm doing, you know, I'm measuring it as she's going to, you know, engage in this cooperative interaction with a peer for a 10-minute period independently in 3 out of 4 opportunities, and it'll be measured by parent report and data collection. So this is, sometimes I'll just do a check-in, with the family. I'll be like, how's it going? And, how did it go, at school today? How is that, how was that birthday party this weekend? And then track my data and keep notes on it. And then also, if you have the chance for maybe a co-treatment hour where there's another therapist and a child in the room, that's also sometimes how I'll measure, especially for the social goal. And then again, for I wrote, a handwriting goal for her as well. And I'm measuring it by, I'll measure it by work samples that I collect, and then I'll collect my data and then, kind of track my goals will be how I'll track her progress.
By including that 30 minutes of consultative time in addition to the direct service, because I think in the olden days, we had our 60-minute therapy hour and it was 50 minutes and you had 5 minutes to go to the bathroom and talk to the parents. And that was really never enough. And so by specifying that additional consultative time, then you have time to actually go over those priorities with the family, do the check-in, also the generalizability of what you're finding in the clinical setting. This is a really important piece that, she's doing this and this and this. Are you seeing this at home? Is it different in different environments? Is it getting better? It's getting worse. And then, retooling your intervention to ensure that those participation related outcomes are being met.
Mm-hmm. And then an anonymous, someone asked about how you would advise the school to support your goals. Well, so that 30 minutes a month, maybe the first month it's with the family for, kind of getting to know her and establishing a home program. And maybe that 30 minutes the second month is really diving in, so how could we help her at school? And I think that's something that you can make some suggestions about. And I think just an understanding, if the team can understand her profile and some of the, those significant sensory modulation and reactivity concerns she's having, maybe they can reframe some of those behaviors she's having in terms of the aggressive outbursts and then, accommodate. So, I think they had started giving her breaks, frequently, especially before handwriting tasks. And she was also being allowed to use a different room during timed or testing periods because that was so I think that they started giving her some accommodations, and you can just kind of be a support and an advocate for the parent and the family, and you can communicate with the school district that way.
Some people are asking about the schools. Stay tuned. We do have the intention to have a whole webinar on ASI in educationally related practice. So stay tuned for those conversations.
And once again, our time goes so fast. Our time is just about up. So I think we just have a couple minutes left. I don't know if we have time for the questions or if we want to go straight to the prizes. I know people have hung in there. So
yeah, and just thank you, Annie and Asia. You guys, of course, we knew, but you did an amazing job. And I think, your cases really illustrate the importance of the clinical reasoning that we do from assessment to intervention to outcomes. And we can't skip any of those steps. And then, in a clinic environment, it's so much easier to work in a clinic environment when you have the tools. Yes, and then all of us have worked outside of those well-equipped clinics. So we'll talk about those later in other webinars, but thank you for demonstrating the classic Ayres SI approach.
Well, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Yes, my pleasure.
So Marco, are you and Melissa, who's overseeing the prize portion of the
We
show?
both. And so we would just want to share what the prizes will be, because people don't know yet. And so the first one will be giving away an easy starter kit And Melissa, maybe you want to share with us, or do you want me to share?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Is he there?
Yes. So there's a lot of things included in the Easy Starter Kit. So you have your 3D shapes and all the cups and a bunch of the different materials that you need to put together your full kit. So it's a good way to start.
Right. Thank you, Melissa. So the winner of the Easy Starter Kit for this session is Angela Bueno. And Angela, if you're there, I'm not sure if you left yet. I hope not. Please send us your email so we can reach out to you and work on the details. Congratulations. So then we have our second prize. So we have 2 prizes today. And the second one is actually a piece of equipment that is provided by Southpaw. And the pieces of equipment that you can see on the screen are the ones we'll be raffling, and the winner will be able to pick one. So thank you, Mark, for that. The winner of the Southpaw equipment piece is Debra Gray. And I hope I said that correctly, Debra. So congratulations. And please send us your contact information so we can reach out to you and work on the details. Congratulations, you both.
And Angela's here, so congratulations, Angela. Is Deborah here?
She was there at least at the very end, but we'll be contacting Deborah if she left. And for the people that didn't win today, we will have giveaways at every single session. So there will be more opportunities. You just come, learn, and maybe win something, which is pretty cool. And thank you so much, Annie and Aja. This was so amazing. Thank you.
We're so lucky to have our leaders. The future is in your hands, and you have such strong skills in research and education, and also in intervention, which is just the heart and soul of what we do. So thank you so much for putting together your wonderful practices and sharing your work so that everyone can move forward in helping children and families.
Okay, so our next webinar, and I don't have the date right off the top of my head, but the
July 13th.
July 13th, we have 2 presenters. We're going to have Aparna Guttery and Richard Furbish, and they're going to be presenting their work on doing ASI with children with challenging behaviors. So more, the children who are a little trickier to work with, often nonverbal, maybe more significant autism. So that's our next one. So come join us. Thank you, everybody.
And Suzanne, that one is the same time as this one, right? That one will be also.
It will also be at 5 p.m. California time. Yes.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Debra, don't worry. We saw your messages saying that you're still here. Don't worry.
Oh, great. Congratulations, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Southpaw. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.